Hello and welcome to Left Footers. We're very pleased to have with us Dr. Jason West, president of Newman. No, I'm just kidding.
Take 12.
Who really is here, Michael? Who really is here?
Is that we have the right guy to answer that? Who of us really is here?
Yeah.
That sounds like a philosophical
That
question.
is deep.
We need a philosophy teacher, definitely. And to do just that, we have today with us Dr. Ryan Topping.
Yes.
Pleasure. I'm Father Mark Kramer.
I'm Mike Landry, finished my wanderings through Spruce Grove and Stony Plain.
I'm so happy. I texted him kind of where to go, so happy.
That's thanks to Father Mark, I found my way again. We're very excited to have a guest with us who is the Vice President, Academic Dean, Author Extraordinaire, and a number of other things.
Great hair.
Totally great hair.
The best hair in the room here
Great
right
hair
now.
in the room.
He does, yeah.
Ryan,
Thank you. Good to see you. Thanks for having me. Wonderful. Thanks for inviting me to talk about Christmas around the fire.
where's the fire?
Yeah, it'd be nice to have the fire, but I think we're not allowed to inside a building.
Can you edit in a fire right there? All right. Well, just before we get into your book, Ryan, you've only been with us in this area, in this diocese for a little while. So can you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you made your way to sunny, warm Edmonton? From the cold places you used to live in.
I know. Fort Lauderdale and Cuba, and we came from near Boston, and we've been here for about 2 years. I'm from Saskatchewan originally, and we had been gone for about 12 studying and teaching, and 2 years ago we came here, and we're very pleased. Our family is between Saskatchewan and British Columbia, so every day I go for a walk around the campus, and every day I am amazed at how wonderful it is to be back.
Glad to have you back.
Thank you.
So you've recently published a new.
It's called a book, Michael. It's called a book. It's not a computer. It's not a tablet. It's not a game.
Though you can get it for your tablet. It's also available on Amazon.
I know.
This book available at fine retails everywhere. But do you want to tell us a little bit about this book and how it came?
Sure. Yes, be happy to.
To be.
So we have so in my family we have 9 kids at last count. We haven't lost any of them yet.
That's a full baseball team.
That's
Have
a
you tried to lose
baseball
any of
team,
them?
a hockey team twice. Yes, we have. We've put a few on eBay up. No bites yet.
No
but,
bites, okay.
For a good deal, ebay.com.
Try Kijiji. I heard Kijiji is really good
better.
for selling things.
Next.
It'd be better.
It rotates.
Spell
though.
it. It's really good. Yeah.
We like most of them most of the time, but anyway, so we've got 9, and I did mean to bring a picture, but they look mostly like me, except they're cute.
It's the hope of every father.
It's the dream. Yeah. Anyway, so we have a lot of we have young kids. They're from 14 down, so they're in a very hyperactive mode. They're all boys except for one.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
So we have to do a lot in the house. And
Where does the girl fit into the 9?
She's second from the bottom, which means that they all fantasize that someone would try to hurt her. As soon as she was born, they had these dreams that someone would I don't know, try to do something mean to her. So they were dreaming of jumping out of their helicopter out of bushes, behind a rock, and they'd take them down. It's actually a beautiful thing. The desire within young men to
it's always interesting
to conquer.
No, but it's also with boys how the creative they can get and what they can do. It's
yes,
like the most
they just
superhero
came,
or super agent or whatever it may be.
It's true. It's true. They come to campus for mass about once a week, and last week they came with a large prong that I didn't realize this was a tongue remover. So they're studying the medieval ages this year. And I guess they're on a chapter concerning torture and heresies. So anyways, so on the book, we have various traditions. And we have a family that has come lived with us for about 2 weeks over Christmas, or stayed with us for about 10 years. And so when the nights are long and the kids are loud, so at 7 o'clock, we put them all in their corners, so they're gone. And then we bring out the drinks and play games, and we always read stories with the kids too sometimes, but it's with and without them. So this little collection grew out of of 10 years of reading together with another family and our kids around Christmas.
I was flipping through. I mean, I had a chance to look at this beforehand, but there are some of my favorite authors in here. You know, noticing Chesterton and Benedict XVI. The Catherine Doherty story was the one that kind of caught me right off the bat, because I love Catherine Doherty, and coming across different stories from her ministry and her time, just always so incredible. And as a tradition, so this is an every night tradition, and who picks the story?
Usually mom and dad. We're rather tyrannical, I have to say, but we're the king and queen, so in our own fantasy world, we get to rule the castle.
Well, not just a fantasy world. This is a real world. This is your castle.
It is. But yeah, we read most nights throughout the year, so we have that habit rolling over. But yes, at Christmas time, then you have, the nights are dark, so you don't want to be outside, and you're often off of work, or you have more time to do nothing. So the question is, what are you going to do with your time? And this is one of the reasons why our civilization is collapsing, because we don't have a good sense of what leisure is for. So in the older view, leisure is the activity whereby you join the pleasurable and the good. So you're done your work, you're ready to be refreshed, you're ready to contemplate. You want to do those things that are both easy to do, they're pleasurable, but they also ennoble you. Whereas now we tend to think of leisure in terms of entertainment. That's the category. And what is entertainment? Entertainment is more of an expression of nihilism than Christianity. So buy Christmas around the fire.
I can't let that lie. You gotta explain. Father, what do you mean?
Father, let's go.
So maybe first explain what nihilism, because I'm pretty sure it's a long word down there. But the thing is, though,
I just presumed as the least qualified guy in the room. I just nodded it and assumed that you two knew what was going on.
Oh, I know what nihilism is, but I'm assuming that most people won't. But then why do you say that for entertainment?
Yeah, I know
that's the fascinating question.
Okay, well, the thing is, St. Thomas has a beautiful line. St. Thomas Aquinas says a line where he says, if you don't pursue intellectual goods, you are of necessity going to be forced or condemned merely to pursuing material goods. So we are the kind of creatures that long. We're born with an infinite appetite. You can't get rid of that. That's just part of the hardware. So the question is, where are you going to turn your rockets? What's this fuel, this passion that is consuming us all the time? What is it going to be directed towards? And the theory of leisure in the classical world and the Christian world is that those appetites lead us can propel us to higher things. So Pope Benedict, for example, wrote an encyclical where he talked about eros a lot.
Deus Caritas.
Deus Caritas, that's it. So eros is the fuel that pulls us out of ourselves. So if you love painting, for example, or if you love paintings, if you travel and you go to a gallery and your heart quickens and your breath begins to increase as you're entering the gallery, because you're going to encounter something that's gorgeous. Or if you like playing the banjo, you can't wait till you get back home and here I am with some friends. So eros is that love which pulls us out of ourselves because it's drawing us towards something different and better than what we are. So leisure is meant to help us do that. Whereas entertainment numbs us. And I called it an expression of nihilism. Well, what's nihilism? Okay, well, just before we talk about nihilism, what are some entertainments that you think are bad, that you would never recommend to a parishioner, or a young man?
This is Father Mark, who's probably been on record for watching things like Family Guy on a regular basis. So I'm intrigued as to where this is going to go. You can edit that out of this.
No, you can keep it in.
Friends. You remember Friends?
No, I never watched Friends.
No.
I would never want to watch Friends. I find that banal. I tried to watch people said it was good, so I wanted to try and watch How I Find My Mother or whatever that
How
was.
I Met Your Mother.
How I Met Your Mother.
Oh,
and I couldn't get into it because it was just not, it didn't keep me going. Mm-hmm. I would say things I would not recommend. I understand the compelling, people love the story, but I can see it just ends up being horribly just not trite, but wrong-headed in terms of where it goes and how they live their life, something like Game of Thrones. I would find it's been a compelling story for a lot of people, and I get that, but it's not like Tolkien at all. It's not the story. And that was an argument I had with somebody who wants to see what they do with the new Tolkien series, because it doesn't want to be like Game of Thrones, because they're two different worldviews, dealing with the same problems, but dealing with them a different way. I find entertainment, the best stuff is the stuff that really makes me go think, makes me want to be a better person. But I can see some shows, Noah, you watch it and you feel like, yeah, that's...
It's interesting that you say that they can be dealing with the same things. So, for example, people often compare Harry Potter with Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia.
Yeah.
So, and good people take different views on Harry Potter. But let's just say for a moment that Harry Potter is not exactly like the Chronicles of Narnia, and yet they converge in many areas. So why do you say they're different? Not those two, but you said Tolkien and the Game of Thrones. What were you getting at? Different premises, different presuppositions, I guess.
Well, the way they look at the world, how they decide to make moral decisions within it.
Right.
It's all about power. It's all about greed and power, and that's the whole thing. So it's the Game of Thrones. So it's dealing with power, and it's great if you get a sense of that and realize, hopefully, that this is not a way to live one's life. With Tolkien, it inspires you. It deals with the evil and the good, but you see the opportunity, what it means to struggle with evil. Like that's the powerful thing about the Lord of the Rings, is it is how it really honestly depicted what it means to deal with good and evil, and how do you fight evil?
Right.
Do you fight evil in any means, or do you choose to fight it in good means and stuff like that? So it deals with those things, and I don't mind novels and stuff or shows that do that, but sometimes it is nihilistic. Like nihilistic means that I don't know the best way to define just nothing. It just mean. I guess nihilism in our modern culture is just basically surrounds us, and we are immersed in a belief that nothing really matters. So do whatever you want. I don't know if that's
exactly. No, I think so. How would you define nihilism? When you talk to kids, what do you say?
Yeah.
Well, it's not a word I use talking to teenagers.
It's accurate though.
But I mean, I think it's very present in the culture they live in. I mean, I've had long conversations about the fact that what they perceive as religion is more of what's been coined a moralistic therapeutic deism. So when they talk
Christian Smith.
When they talk about what God is like and what God is about, they have this idea of very much the self-soothing God who's all just like this great self-improvement plan. And like, well, why would I bother with the rules and all of that when I can improve myself by doing whatever I want? But to me, when I think of nihilism, or if I was going to try and explain the concept to them, I would talk about, filling yourself with nothing. If you spend your life eating French fries,
you feel like a Frenchie.
Well, and the first serving of French fries, like a fresh batch of McDonald's French fries is I mean, I enjoy a fresh.
Sure, yeah.
But the second one and the third one and the 10th one, at a certain point, like if you eat too much McDonald's, you feel that you've eaten too much McDonald's, and you feel like you've eaten too much McDonald's sometimes for days.
Oh, sir. It's only a wafer thin.
Yeah. I couldn't eat another thing. I'm absolutely stuffed.
And if you did a whole diet, well, there's that whole supersize me thing a few years back. But I think, nihilism is them not just feeding their bodies like that, but what they feed their souls with. My experience in the schools is just this dramatic shift in the last 15 years about how loud it used to be at lunch in the cafeteria. Just the sheer volume, the chatter, the chatter, the life that would come. And you walk into a high school cafeteria now, and
that's not the case.
Wow. Sitting with social media or YouTube, and not that everything they're looking at is bad, but it's in a lot of cases, it's a whole lot of, there's nothing there. And rather than having the conversation with the person sitting beside you or across from you, it's just filling the time. Or sitting on an airplane where you used to, while you're waiting for the plane to take off, so the movie might come on, you might introduce yourself to the person on your left and your right. Well, we're all earbuds in and in our own worlds, waiting in line for anything. Waiting in line in a bathroom. Everybody, there's never a moment where...
I have to say, I'm quite happy in bathrooms not to chat, but anyways, to each his own, Mike.
But if you can pull this thing together, might be a lot of dough in it for us, maybe a little extra bonus for you, help you with those house payments. All right, good things.
Well, but I'm thinking like sporting lineups in bathrooms. You might talk about something you just saw.
Conviviality is withering away. One reason that let's say John Paul II or these great philosophers that we have in our tradition, they talk about nihilism along these lines too. That it's the loss of the sense of it's the loss of the belief that reason can know the good. So once we no longer think we have ends that can be known, that you can figure out by your reason, not by authority, but by your own wits. Once you no longer know what the purpose of, let's say, the sexual act is, what's that for? I don't know. Or what is the purpose of being a friend, or of strength in politics? What's the purpose of government? All these things. Once that's all falls away, what's left? Will and your passions. So nihilism is usually defined as willing simply for the sake of willing. And it's an old problem. Augustine talks about this. He has a beautiful phrase where he says, when you've lost the good of the intellect, all that's left is, his phrase is, libido dominandi. the libido, we have that phrase, which just means the passion, the desire for dominating. So there's this sense that we want to ape God. We're in the imago Dei. That's our hardware again, that infinite desire. You can't help it. We are ordered to the good, so you can only be happy. Your hardware is only going to be enacted, made fully actualized. Your potencies are only be realized if your whole life is ordered like a pilgrim towards the Holy Grail, towards some quest, and the quest of God eventually. But if you get rid of that quest, then nothing is going to work well. And these passions that we have, these real desires, these longings for beauty and perfection, they're going to turn inward, and they're going to be manifested simply as an expression of will and power and domination. And so that's in our Game of Thrones. I have a brother who likes Game of Thrones, and I hadn't seen any or read any, so I started reading them a little bit ago, and they're not bad. I mean, it's decently written. It's kind of like chewing on a Smarties bar. You can pop them quickly; they go down. It's sweet, but I think you're right that the premise is that there is no moral horizon. There is no good and evil. We're in a Nietzschean world for such entertainments. So all the more reason why we need to get Christmas around the fire.
Buy this book.
I'm going to tell you about some stories.
It'll solve all your problems.
What we need an aggressive evangelization of culture. This has been the cry of the last at least 3 or 4 popes, really, that the West is de-Christianized, and so we need to hit intellectual sources, yes, but we also need culture matters a great deal. So what we do with our free time is almost as important as what we do in our conscious time, so to speak, or in our work. They both matter, but if you leave the night, then pretty soon, eventually, the day is going to become dark too. That is to say, if you leave your entertainments, if you leave what you do with your sex life, with your friends, how you drink, what do you do on Sunday? If you leave all of that to the market, then pretty soon you have nothing to live for. Okay, here's some authors. You mentioned a few: Chesterton, Tolstoy, Stephen Leacock. He's an interesting one. He was around 1930. He was probably the most popular writer in English at the time. He's Canadian. He was a humorist. Willa Cather, she's a great American novelist. She writes about regions, about the Midwest. She has a beautiful book about Quebec, Something on the Rock. I'm forgetting the title. Oscar Wilde. Do you know Oscar Wilde? Mm-hmm. Yeah. He was a bad boy. He comes up with this phrase, Gautier, a Frenchman, comes up with this phrase in the 19th century that art is for art's sake. This is a totally nihilistic, atheistic concept. Okay, Wilde takes up that bohemian cry and makes it popular in the English-speaking world. But he always had, so he's known for that, but he has this love for the church. And in fact, when he was about 20, he started meeting with oratorians, a religious order, to talk about what it would be like to enter the Catholic Church. His dad caught wind of this and said, "Son, you will be disinherited if you join the Catholic Church." So then he stopped meeting with the priests and had a dissolute life. But then on his deathbed, he comes back and he's received by the church. And he's got a story in here that I put in. It's called The Selfish Judge. And shows his love. It's a children's story. It shows his love for the child Christ, and how even in Oscar Wilde's life, it's a beautiful image of, even if you reject Christianity, we still live, yes, there's nihilism, but we still live in the Christian soup. We don't know how the stories fit. We don't know how the ingredients come together, but they're there. They're around us. We still like justice. We like the idea of being nice. We like immigrants. You think of Canadian foreign policy and how this is probably 3 years ago, the Liberal Party, Justin Trudeau, is no friend of traditional Catholic moral teaching. And yet he and his colleagues were extremely proud of the fact that Canada is going to be welcoming in people that didn't have a home. You couldn't do that really in a country that was fully nihilistic. Okay? But I think this goes to your moralistic phrase too. It's not a complete picture, but the parts of the puzzle are there.
Well, and it's often been sort of hypothesized that a lot of times what we do pass on, whether it's to our kids or even, what people's perspective of Christianity is, it's more like the word for immunization.
Inoculation?
We inoculate people to the faith because we give just enough. I mean, you look at Christmas, the concept of Christmas, and it's, you can't ignore the Christian origins of the holiday. I mean, it's in the name.
Right.
Anywhere you go, if Christmas carols are playing, Christ is in them. Anywhere you go, the lights in the darkness. I mean, there's imagery, the creche, which our Holy Father wrote about just on the weekend. You've got all these bits and pieces that are there, but it's just enough to make it sound like we're doing something without ever really diving into, well, why? Why did he come into the story? Why did he come to us? My parish priest gave a great homily on faith and hope, and talked about, kind of the big picture of faith, but hope meaning that I understand how it applies to me. How this big picture of stuff really, not just Jesus came to save us all, but Jesus
it's not salvation. Good in general. It's good for my life.
And how many people don't see that, don't understand that? I think that was when I was, again, looking through some of the authors and reading Benedict's reflection on Advent. And
that's a good one.
The idea that we need to dive in a little bit deeper, and those of us who are raising families, I mean, I have a small family compared to yours. I only have 5 children, but
only 5
children. We're still just one line in hockey right now. I have no subs.
Not bad.
Sorry, totally lost my thought there.
You kept digressing. I was wondering if you're going to keep the thought going. I hear that you just listen for the choo-choo train. Choo-choo, choo-choo.
But I think about the need to define traditions that bring the story to life. Yes. Because, I mean, in a world that is very entertainment-centered, there is a great temptation to just let the kids go to the entertainment. But then we reach a point where, for them, they don't have that hope. They have the big picture of the faith, but that hope that it really applies to them doesn't come along. And that was, I think, one of the things when I saw this that I thought, oh, there's a piece, particularly for my older kids who love stories. My kids who will stay up reading. Right. My oldest daughter happened to be, as I was trying to finish my first degree, was just starting to pick up books. And so I'm constantly sitting with a book in my hand because I'm trying to catch up on readings around full-time work. And so every time she sees me at home, I'm sitting in the chair with a book in my hand. So she's sitting beside me with a book in her hand. And it just kind of got passed on. But how often that, they would just as soon have a comic book in their hand as C.S. Lewis. Sure. Or Lucy Maud Montgomery or other authors who have good stories. And the idea of maybe trying to share a little bit more of that. My wife, when my daughter was younger, read through the Laura Ingalls, the Little House on the Prairie stories. I read through the Chronicles of Narnia with the older two, but to kind of try and catch that again, because it's been a couple of years since we've done that. And I look at this and I think to myself, there's something, because it's not, I mean, you're going to take on reading The Lord of the Rings to your kids out loud. I mean, that's a tough sell to keep them interested.
September through March project.
Well, I mean, my kids who are flying in 3 different directions. I mean, it's Narnia was an easier swallow for them, kind of collectively. But even be able to kind of start with smaller stories, and particularly for, I was thinking of families who maybe don't have that habit at all. Something like this seemed like a really great thing.
Yeah, you know, the whole theory of leisure is, I agree exactly with what you're saying. I think that's fantastic. Often when parents are thinking, how can I help my kids, or pastors, how can I help my families, encourage them to build up their habits? A temptation is to just say no, but in fact, saying no doesn't do much. You do have to say no, but then you have to say yes. So in other words, let's say your kids are playing video games. You know what the average is? This is even a slightly out of date stat, so it's, I think, increased, but this is for men, not kids. So 18 to 32. This is for 1 out of 2 men in that range. The average number of hours spent playing video games, so this is not tablet time, this is not the rest of it, it's 2 hours and 48 minutes.
A day?
A day. Yeah, so that's an average for 50% of the young men in our society. Now, oh my God, what does that mean? That means that we have young men that are not being raised to become fathers and husbands and priests and missionaries and business owners and politicians and people who are willing to stand up, to take leadership, to be responsible. Okay, anyways, my point is that we can't just say no, we have to say yes. So we have to figure out when we're constructing a family's mode of leisure, what are the building blocks that we can set in place that are going to make a foundation so that it becomes pleasurable. You know, the fact is, if you let a kid read good literature, you don't need to tell them not to read bad literature, or at least not much, because they'll have an appetite, just like with food. If you give a kid good things to eat, in general, they will, right? Isn't that right? No, is that wrong? In general, they will cultivate an appetite for better things. And books and music, the rest of it's the same. You know, here's something for you, Father. In the church, now, the church used to be the leader in cultural matters. We have the best paintings, we have the best buildings, we have the best music. And for a while now, we've pulled back in that realm. Well, we need to push forward again. We need to demand excellence in our music. So that means chant and polyphony, chiefly. According to Vatican II, those are the 2 best forms of music. Sorry, I know you like the guitar. It doesn't mean these other parts don't have some position to play, but there's a hierarchy, there's an order. Like when it's time to be around the campfire, play the campfire songs. When it's time for Mass, sing Palestrina or sing Gregorian chant. Anyways, maybe that's a tirade, but my point is...
Yeah, a little bit.
My point is, you can't just say no. We can't, I don't like video games. I don't like this. I don't like, you can't only say no. We have to add, okay, what are the good things you can do? Another good thing you can do is, instead of being consumers of culture, we need to help our kids, and we need to, for ourselves, be makers of culture. So don't just watch a movie tonight. Put on a play. If you have some kids in your house, get them to, okay, here are 4 parts. We're going to take a scene from Shakespeare. We're going to put it on tonight, or we're going to put it on the weekend. In our house, we recently put on a play we got our kids to put on this play, The Life of Father Lacombe, who's a famous, legendary local priest. I didn't know anything about him till we moved back, but I just been reading about him, and absolutely inspiring, heroic figure, amazing. So in this play that our kids put on a couple plays, and the other, one of them, this is a play about St. Benedict. We always put on a St. Benedict play every year. We have a couple set times. Anyways, sorry, this was the St. Benedict play. One of our kids was playing the devil. We put this play on with another family in the summer, and he was tempting the monks to be bad, to kill Benedict by poison. I don't know if you remember that scene. Anyways, so at one point, this one boy, Thomas, he had a frog in his mouth, but we didn't know that. And so in the middle of the play, then he says, "Kill Benedict." And then a frog comes leaping out of his mouth. And we're all just about sick. And then he told us, I practiced that 200 times yesterday. With a live frog.
And then he kissed his mom.
And then I kissed his mom. So anyways, instead of being consumers, stop listening to canned music. Let's learn how to play music. And folk music has a profound, I'm not saying only Palestinian. We need all levels of music, but we have to be the ones making it. Don't let China produce everything for us.
That makes sense. Stop making made in China, made in Canada too.
Made in Canada. Made in my household.
It's interesting.
Made in your parish.
Yeah, no, for sure. It was interesting. There's one person I heard on a podcast. He was going on just about some of the concerns in our modern culture. And his comment, half jokingly, but half correctly, I thought it was just a profound comment. He said, go read a book. Go read a book. Go read. Because he sees like half the problems we have is people truly are not reading. And there's a whole development of thought and ability to deal with stuff when one reads that is just not there. We read things, but in the text message, a little bit of the stuff we're being fed so much stuff on television. There he was, coming back to me. His comment, he loves movies, absolutely. He writes movies and stuff like that, but he said a visual culture is dumb and all about emotion, whereas a culture of literature is a culture that thinks. And it's a profound
Now, are you willing to say who said that?
Oh, Andrew Clavin. Andrew Clavin, he's a podcaster, he's a writer, he's written many movies and stuff like that. He's on the Daily Wire and stuff like that. I love listening to him because he has that literature piece. But he said a visual culture just makes you makes you dumb. And it's all about emotions, and that's our culture. Absolutely. Everybody's about emotions, everything feels right or feels wrong. But if you read, though, and you begin to think, then all of this, and that's happened to me. I was getting to the point where I was just finally this is not enough, and I started listening to different things, started reading more, and all of a sudden I go, I started to see things in a very different way. That when reading, and it makes me think, watch so much, why not read? I think that's an experiment to make. With your comment about with families, though, I remember one family, mother said, sure, you can go watch TV. Got to read a book for an hour, then you go watch TV for an hour. Or starting to do things whatever ways, and because then they read, or give them an opportunity to get exposed to different ways of thinking, and then have a discussion about it, or whatever, and get things that are exciting. I read, and I just went, I remember lots of comic books when I was a kid, but there was a lot with the comic books that it was story, it was maybe more entertainment and all that, but there's stuff and I love novels, like a really good novel that can teach you so much because it brings you into the human.
Who's your favorite novelist?
Favorite novelist?
Or one of them?
C.S. Lewis I like a lot, for sure. One I read all the time is David Eddings, because the whole character kind of thing, fantasy and stuff like that. I've read when I was a kid, Roald Dahl, absolutely, hands down. I loved his Charlie and the Glass Factory, Charlie and the Glass Elevator or whatever it is. I can't remember. Stuff like that. It was so good, I can't remember. But I just loved his stories because they were just fascinating and stuff. And I have enjoyed totally.
He's got a poem called TV Mike.
Yeah.
Do you know that one?
Oh, which one?
About TV Mike, about a boy named Mike who only watches TV.
Look at me, everybody. I'm the first person in the world to be sent by television. Wow, what a wild trip that was. It's the greatest thing that's ever happened to me.
Oh, yeah. I don't think I've ever read that particular story. Maybe I should have when I was a kid. I would have watched less. But funny about Roald Dahl, I knew him as a children's author. Then I finally read a book, stories he wrote for adults. It was a fascinating story about this man who began to grow the ability to see through things. And he did this, and he developed the ability, and he just played cards all the time, and he won tons of money. To one day he went in front of the mirror and looked in the mirror, and he saw a clot going through his blood veins going towards his heart. And then he changed his life. And it was really a neat story, but those adult stories or things would tell a story and brings you in with real people or people that we can relate to. That's why I love anything that's truly character driven, even TV shows. When I watch stuff that's about characters and you just fall in love with them because, especially when they're real. And that's Andrew Clavin's kind of thing. He hates so much of Christian movies because they're not real. He said, but tell a real story with real problems, but tell it honestly in a real way, and that human kind of thing. And it's amazing. Like even some of the best books you read, they may not be people that would do what you want them to do or think they should act, but they actually deal. Like I love those stories when the people deal with real problems and they're trying. They're making mistakes and all that, but they're dealing with those questions. And And sometimes that's why I love science fiction in many ways, because they actually deal with problems. Whereas it's funny, with Harry Potter, I think half the criticisms would never happen with Harry Potter if it was on another planet.
Okay.
Because it's here, all of a sudden it becomes like, whereas Lord of the Rings is very obviously in a different place and you deal with some of those things, obviously different ways it's written. But science fiction, they could deal with religious questions or questions of these kind of things. And they actually have a real conversation about that, but talk about it. Instead of being lectured to, which is a kind of the criticism right now, people are lecturing everybody about virtue signaling, how good they are, instead of actually being good and dealing with the good. But I find novels are amazing that way. And that's why I like science fiction, because they can deal with some of these questions. You go, interesting. So some of my favorite novels by Robert Heinlein and so forth have been I love the book Starship Troopers by Robert Heinlein. It's like, wow, it just dealt with all these kind of human questions, dealing with the military and all that and so forth. So yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, you raise a couple of interesting points, because when you talk about the emotionalism we get into some of these stories, if you look at how people reacted to the finale of Game of Thrones, people lost, the whole final season wasn't what they wanted, and people are petitioning to rewrite the story the way they want it to be.
And they probably already have online, and probably filmed
as though we as the consumers of it have the right to decide what it's going to be. Or similarly, Star Wars fans. I mean, we're coming towards the end of this whole 42-year journey through the Skywalker saga.
It's a love-hate relationship.
And there's been a real love-hate relationship, because when they made episode 7, everybody's like, well, you just rehashed A New Hope all over again. You just retold the same, really, in a lot of ways, just retold the same story, just made it a millennial problem instead of, the villain was a lot less just straight up dark and a little bit more tortured. And then when they did episode 8, they tossed the whole formula out the window, and everybody lost their minds about that too, because, well, this isn't what our characters that we love so much would do. And so it's interesting. I think the emotionalism really plays itself out when you get that cult following in a story, because they have an idea of how it's supposed to be, and then when it doesn't work out. But then on the flip side, you have Star Trek.
Yeah.
And Gene Roddenberry really tried to paint this utopian future where humanity on its own had solved all of their own problems, and then went out to the universe to bring all of our solutions to everybody else too, as though we on our own.
Didn't quite work for them, did it?
Well, and if you dive into Star Trek, kind of, I don't know, lore fandom, whatever you want to say, Deep Space Nine stands out as this ugly sister, because.
But it's an amazing show.
Because in the latter third of the series, they end up in this dark, deep Dominion war where good people are put in bad positions and make decisions that Gene Roddenberry, who wrote Star Trek, never would have stood for, never would have had his captain, essentially run a whole lie to bring about good, and so you're left with, essentially a deep moral question: do the ends justify the means to get there? And some of the best, watching your way through Star Trek, some of the best Star Trek episodes are the ones that actually sat there and looked at a big question like that. And there's maybe, in the 1,000 episodes of Star Trek, there might be 20 or 30 really good stories like that. But I think where these stories accelerate, or really excel, maybe not accelerate, but excel, is the moments where they make us take a step back and look at ourselves in the mirror and say, do we do better? But the trouble is when 95% of what you're taking in doesn't ask that question, when we get uncomfortable with the ones that do.
Right. It's true. It's true. That's, as it were, the heroic argument for why literature is good. You've both given a version of it. That it's good because it presents us with moral dilemmas that call forth a virtuous response. Something like that. Yes?
Sure.
Something like that. Okay. Now, it's interesting. Cardinal Newman on literature, he wrote novels himself, and he says that literature is really the neighings and brayings and barkings of mankind. So what literature is, it's a mirror. It gives us a reflection of what we are, and human beings are, being what we are, we're glorious and we're fallen. And hence the neighing, the brayings, and the barkings of mankind. On the one hand, yes, we need stories. Why? Because they help us to cultivate our moral imagination. They help us to see good and evil played out in front of us. Okay, so that's true. On the other hand, if you're postmodern, you're going to tend to stay there. There's nothing but story. So it's very common and trendy in certain circles now to talk about narrative, and narrative swamps truth. There's nothing but a story to tell, and people who are postmodern configure or see the relationship or the conflict between peoples as a conflict over stories. Whoever tells the story better and more persuasively, this is how marketing plays out. You know, we're going to win in the market if we can tell our story in a more flashy, exciting, deterministic way. Now, Christianity can't go all the way along that line with talking about stories. Why? Because we think that the universe, because man is not only an emotional being, but he's rational. And at the heart of the universe is the Logos. And the Logos becomes flesh, so you have reason becoming a story. Reason becoming particularized, made concrete in Christ, of course. My point here is to say that on the one hand, we have to praise stories, but on the other hand, you'll have typically in let's say, in more liberal, educated liberal circles, you'll get the kind of educational argument that, well, we just need kids to read. It doesn't matter what they read as long as they're reading. And as Christians, we want to say, not really. Why? Because we do think there's a coherent pattern to the cosmos. We do think it matters whether or not Obi-Wan Kenobi lies to save the universe. You shouldn't. Right? In other words, we have a moral fabric, and we're capable of. We need not only literature, but we need philosophy too. That's my point. Reason has to go with the life of emotion, the life of telling stories, of making vivid, concrete facts and scenarios, has to always be evaluated. And the way that we evaluate is through cultivating prudence. So stories are good if they allow us to cultivate prudence. That's the ancient. That's why in classical education, why you tell stories is to help you to practice, as it were. It's like a play field. But if there isn't a moral framework, if there is no good and evil, then you just get dark stories, and you get postmodern literature, and you get existentialist literature, and then you're just reveling in evil, for the sake of seeing the depravity of man. Well, that gets tiring after a while.
Are you having any negative thoughts? All I have are negative thoughts.
I mean, if you look at a lot of the young adult literature that's been really popularized,
yes.
If you look at, the Hunger Games being probably the most popular of the bunch, it's all dystopian futures.
It's all dystopian
yes. Futures.
Yes, that's right.
Why do you want to live in a world where you think it's going to end badly?
Yeah. Well, and I guess
yeah. I mean, what gets me about those films is that everything's going to end. It's there's no hope. Even the title of the Star Wars film was A New Hope as one of their titles. But the thing is, there's a whole need of real hope, and hope can only come into play when you're dealing with truth. The things that you can have real hope in things that are true, that yes, we are good and we are bad. We have parts of us that can do amazing things, but at the same time we have that capacity for evil. But how do you deal with that without freaking totally out? Unless you have a hope in a Savior who can straighten you out, something beyond yourself. And then when there's hope in Jesus Christ being born, and then he's dying, or he suffered for us, he died for us and rose again, and then we can have that as our framework. And that gives you hope. Okay, I can go through this life, that quest to follow Jesus can make a difference.
The pilgrimage has an endpoint. Mm-hmm. And hope is related to an object that can be known. If you can't know the object, namely, if you can't know the story ends well, you actually can't have hope. It's interesting. I had a conversation, and you have conversations like this, don't you? Where
absolutely. When you tell us what you're talking about.
I had the exact same conversation.
This is a cliffhanger.
Students every day.
Thanks for being with us for Love Footers today.
Okay, where people, you get people talking along these lines of, it doesn't matter, it's about the journey, it's not the destination. That topos, that common phrase that people use. Now, I had a conversation with a very intelligent lady just the other day, And she told me that. I mean, did you read that off a cereal box? I couldn't believe it. I mean, you don't believe that. If you're driving and all this, and you know there's a bus that's going to come flatten you, you don't keep driving, you stop. You get off that road, right? But we fooled ourselves to thinking that when it comes to big questions, metaphysical issues, that it doesn't really matter. We can still be happy. We can still have little h hope, even though the world is going to end in an inferno. So I like what you're saying, Father. Yes, you need to know a destination. You need to know that there is an object, there is a Savior ultimately that redeems the suffering that we walk through. And good Christian literature plays that out. It's all, as it were, a rift on the gospel.
So let's say you're a young person. I mean, if you think about what the audience is going to be here, a lot of the people who are watching these podcasts are young people or young families, and we're growing up in this culture where, entertainment and leisure are not the same thing. I mean, what we've been talking about today. And so you want to turn back towards some of these stories. Mm-hmm. I mean, you've obviously written a good tool for this season, but what would you want to say to a young person who's sort of looking at this, is sort of maybe feeling a little pain, sort of saying, well, yeah, right. I need to, they're kind of still, they still like their Game of Thrones, but they're sort of feeling like maybe they want something a little bit more to go alongside that. Because to sort of say, all right, just toss out everything you've been doing, and we all know how well that goes in any sphere of life. But what would you want to say to them?
I'd say find someone that you think has a good life. Find someone that you think has an ordered life that is truly joyful, that is happy, that is virtuous. And then, like the proverb says, don't leave their door. Knock and see what they do. What sorts of habits do they have that have brought them to a noble and virtuous life? So that's the first thing. Go find people who are virtuous, and then don't let go of them. And ask them, well, how do you construct a life of godly habits? What time do you go to bed? When do you get up? Do you exercise? Do you eat? These basic fundamental, or how well do you eat? These fundamental disciplines, which flow over to the disciplines of the intellectual life, they're fallen away. We think that freedom, why? Because we have disordered view of freedom. We think that freedom has no goal. We think that freedom is a good that we direct, as opposed to the older ideas that freedom is ordered toward the good, and our freedom is only satisfied if it attains its goal. We're more like we're a ship, we're on a pilgrimage, but we need to get back to the harbor. And if you don't get to the harbor, you're just lost at sea. You're tossing, and you're going to be unhappy. So that'd be the first thing I'd say. Go find someone that you think is happy, and ask what they do, and then copy them.
What's the second thing you'd say?
Well, it depends where a person is at. St. Francis of de Sales says that the foundation to the spiritual life is going to be found. You're only going to build a solid foundation if you have a spiritual director. So go find a priest, and if you can't find a priest, find that wise person and help them to write up a rule of life for you, and then be accountable to them. Meet up once a month or once every 2 months or whatever it happens to be. Now you can't say that to someone who's on the street doing drugs and is, needing to do other things first. But eventually that's what you need. You need a rule of life. Why? Because virtues only come into being after repetitive acts. So doing something well once doesn't make much an impression. But if you do it well 30 times, all of a sudden you now are a little bit more courageous than you used to be. And that's all I'd say.
Excellent.
Thanks for looking at my book.
Where can people buy your book?
Anywhere good books are sold, I'm sure. I don't actually know. But they
there's this place called Amazon. You can find it at Amazon.
That's true. You can buy books there. But
Kindle or otherwise.
As an author, I would never recommend Amazon if you can help it, because Amazon is like Walmart. They buy big, they sell cheap. So the people who make books don't get anything if you buy it off of Amazon. Anyways, but you can buy it at bookstores.
In Edmonton, Universal Church Supplies is a good place to check out.
Ah, there you go.
Not that they're sponsoring us, but it's worth mentioning that is a place to go.
The Topping residents.
How are they going to hold you? What's your email?
Good question. Probably go to Universal Church Supplies.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Less Footers. Please subscribe to our social media channels, like us, and then go read a book.
But don't just read a book too. Go search for truth. And that's a good thing too.
Very good.